Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Scooters, shared mobility, and more tonight on Behind the Headlines. Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Kemp Conrad from the Memphis City Council. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Along with Doug McGowan, Chief Operating Officer for the City of Memphis. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
Along with Bill Dries, Senior Reporter with the Memphis Daily News. We'll start with the scooters, the bird scooters, and I'm going to turn to you, Kemp. You pushed this at the City Council. Suddenly there were scooters all over downtown. They've been in other cities. We're not the first, but in some cities it's gone great, in some cities it's gone badly. Talk about why you pushed to bring these some 500 electric scooters through a company called Bird to Memphis.
Well, there are a lot of reasons. One of the things that I said in a recent post, one of my favorite quotes by Sun Tzu, opportunities multiply as they were seized. And we had an opportunity to bring this transportation option to Memphis. Memphis was way ahead of the curve on shared mobility, a term that we're going to be hearing a lot more about in the coming months and years. Chief McGowan has been a huge champion of shared mobility here in Memphis, and we already had the architecture and the framework set up here so that we could harness the opportunity. So when Nashville wasn't ready, they don't have the bike infrastructure that we have. They didn't have their regulatory framework put together. They weren't nimble enough to come up with a short-term fix until they got their legislative scheme together. And so they were going to take these scooters away. And so they were either going to go back to California or go to another city. And we were able to put a deal together in less than a week to bring this to Memphis. And it just happened that the following week anyway, we were going to be introducing our shared mobility ordinance, which governs not just e-scooters, but bikes and other forms and conveyances of shared mobility, if you will. And
we'll go through some more of that and dig deeper into that. And I should say, for those who haven't seen them, let alone people who haven't ridden them, they're around town. They are, you sign up through your phone and a credit card. You have to be 18 and above. You see them all over downtown. You see them in Midtown, but they're potentially anywhere in the city. It's strange because you don't check them out with anyone. They're just there waiting for you if you find one on your app. Are you, Doug, from your point of view, you see people on them and they seem to be having a great time and it seems like a fun thing, but also people talk about them being a kind of a practical way to finish the last mile, particularly in a city where I think everyone at the table would agree that MATA, public transportation in Memphis, like a lot of cities, is not what we would like it to be ideally. Are the scooters more than just fun and actually serving a practical need in terms of transit for people getting to work and getting to places?
I think the short answer is yes, and this is something that we knew was a need in our city. We have some deficits in our transit system, our fixed route bus system that our friends at MATA and our partners at MATA are working very hard to make improvements to, but we also knew there was gaps in the ability of people to get to where they wanted to go once they reached their destination on MATA or before they actually got there. So we're seeing people using both the bike share system as well as the Bird scooters as an opportunity to move in and around the areas where they need to go. So for instance, downtown and midtown, they're going from one spot to another, and we're also seeing people who are using the transit system to get on these modes of conveyance to get to the final destination where their bus may not go. So we're seeing multiple uses. I think fun is okay to have, but also using it to get around. Every one of these trips that someone makes is a trip that they're not making in their car. And so for individuals who might say, well, these are in my way, remember that's another parking spot that you might have if you're taking a car trip. So limiting the number of car trips that people are making, expanding the opportunities that people have to get to the places that they want to go in a very short order, that's what this is all about.
Bill, Dries.
So we started out with 200, we're now up to 400 to 500. Do you have stats on the ridership? I guess you would call it the ridership. What are the numbers so far for the Bird?
Yeah. What we might do is talk about that and then bike share, because maybe I can hit on the scooter numbers and then Chief McGowan can talk about bike share. And again, I think it's like he said, this is really it's about transportation options. It's about an ecosystem, of transportation options. And I think we're going to see more of this as companies continue to innovate and technology continues to, be what it is. There are going to be more options. And so I believe Bird has been here now 19 days. They've averaged about 1,200 rides per day, which is a very good number. And that's over the weekend, weekdays. About 8,600 individuals, different unique users, have ridden Birds, and for a total of about 24,000 total rides. And the average distance is 1.9 miles. So I know we've been very pleased in the adoption. When I see people around town, people really like them. And I know that the company has been very happy as well, which I think is great for Memphis. When you have some cities that can't figure it out, that are seen as really progressive cities. But then a city like Memphis, I think we showed how this can be done. And we're only the 15th city that they had gone into.
Mm-hmm. Is this increasing Explore Bike Share's market? Or is there are there enough numbers at this time?
No, I think it's complementary. So Bike Share's had about 8,000 rides, and they've had 3,000 unique riders, and they've met about half of the, already in the first month, they've met half of their annual membership goal. So I think we're seeing better than we expected adoption of the Bike Share. So when you add those two together, you're talking about 32 to 35,000 trips that people are making on this shared mobility platform just in the first month. So I think it's fair to say that Memphis has adopted the shared mobility models that we've put into place. There's no reason to expect that that won't continue to be successful.
And the ordinance includes the word tricycles or trikes. Is that what's next on this?
Well, I think there was a council member that wanted that in there. I think so. That was why that was added. But who knows? Possibly so. But nothing I'm aware of. I think that was in response to something that a council member wanted, to have that form of conveyance also referenced in the ordinance.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd just say we were trying to be as inclusive as we possibly could. When we did the ordinance, we had been thinking about this for some time. We knew that shared mobility was coming down the road. That's why we were prepared when this opportunity came. So for some number of months, the staff at City Hall, along with the staff at Innovate Memphis, had been working on shared mobility options to make sure that we were prepared when those opportunities came. We had been seeing what's happening nationally. We had been doing some pretty good research on options that were coming down the road. We wanted to be prepared when those came, and that's why we were ready with the ordinance. And then including things like tricycles, that may not be something that is on the scene yet today, but we want to be sure that we were prepared to be as inclusive as possible if that became a possibility.
And as I understand it, Nashville had about 1,000 of these, and that proved to be kind of overwhelming for them. We started with 200 and a deliberate effort to say, we're going to see how this works and then scale up from there.
Sure, and I think that the partners at Bird were willing to work with us on that. We said, let's see how it goes. They were also willing to work on some of the rules of the road and how they were operating. We very soon, parking is an issue for these, sometimes to make sure that individuals put them in a place that don't impede others' ability to enjoy the public right-of-way. And so the folks at Bird were willing to engage with us. It's not typically their model to have designated parking areas, but very soon you'll start seeing some designated parking areas for the scooters, just a preferred place for people to drop them off. Does two things. First, it's predictable. You'll know where you're going to run across one. And second, when you're done riding, it's a logical place that you could put one that is out of the way of others' ability to enjoy the right-of-way.
Does our experience with Explore Bike Share, with Bird, and with whatever comes along in shared mobility, does it kind of change what we're looking for out of the Memphis Area Transit Authority?
Well, I'll say it this way. I think they're both necessary. So you need, as a part of your transit system, the ability to convey large numbers of people across large distances. That's the most efficient way to do it. So I've often said it like this: if you think about transportation and mobility like your circulatory system, you need some big arteries in order to transport all of those red blood cells around your body, but you need some smaller veins and then some smaller capillaries to feed into that. And that's what we're talking about. Think of MATA as the major arteries and veins in your body that are moving the biggest volume of citizens around the city, but you're using these other means of shared mobility for either short trips across a defined area or to feed into that larger distribution system. That's typically the most efficient way to do things.
For people who, we've talked about Explore Bike Share and we talk about Bird scooters, those are not city-funded programs, or a small amount of city funding. Am I right about that? I mean, these are private companies. The city's not paying to charge them. It's not paying, I don't think, a leasing fee to Bird to have them here. You all are sort of the regulatory framework, but not providing any, or is it a small amount of money?
We're actually getting money.
Okay.
We're actually getting money
Okay.
from Bird. So there'll be a fee they pay for a license. They will pay us per scooter for every scooter they have on the road, and then voluntarily they also pay to the city $1 per scooter per day for reinvestment back into infrastructure. So there's not only is there no cost to the city, there should be, once they're at scale, several $100,000 in revenue that we can invest back into our infrastructure to accelerate more shared mobility options.
And is scale expected to be something like 1,000 scooters?
We'll see. Like we started at 200. I think what's happened in some cities and like in China is people have just come in and just dumped bikes. And so our model here is we like the dockless scooters, but we like docked bike share. Well, there's some places that have experimented with having dockless bikes as well, and those are obviously bigger and harder to kind of put off the sidewalk. And so
to say what that is, and I was just in Seattle, which has that. Line Bike is a big company,
Right.
and it is the oddest thing when you're walking downtown and there are these yellow and green bikes kind of randomly parked
Right.
all over the sidewalk, and you realize it is a bike share system, but they aren't. They just could be kind of anywhere all over the street.
So the terminology is dockless and docked.
Right.
So those are dockless bikes. We have a docked bike share program. The scooters are more organic, so they're dockless, but they're also smaller, and you can put them out of the way. So we started with 200. We wanted to make sure here that we just weren't dumped on, and that there was going to be use. And so the way we set it up was they could go up to 500 based on ridership. And so the metric is about 3 rides a day. Once a scooter is getting 3 rides a day, that's when you want to increase it, because you want enough of them so when people start to depend on them, when they walk out, there are enough around where you can take it somewhere and not be worried about coming out there, one not be there. But you don't want them just to be dumped all over the town either. And so that's how we approached it, as a demand-driven model. And if I could say one thing about Doug's effort in Innovate Memphis on bike share, and he can speak to the funding on that, but that created, I believe, 13 jobs in the community.
Really? Yes.
So there's wealth creation as well, and Chief can speak
There
more
was
to
a
that.
certain amount of investment with bike share. I assume that was city money in terms of when you see I assume the stations are bike shares investment, but there are kind of carve-outs in the bike lanes, carve-outs along the street. I assume a certain amount of public works money went into that.
There's no public works money or no
Okay.
direct money that went from the city into that. There was a permit that was applied for through bike share, but there was a cooperative agreement. Our investment from a city, if you will, was allowing them to use that public
Okay.
right of way.
Okay, I know.
I just want to make sure that folks know Bird is a for-profit company. Explore Bike Share is a non-profit model, so raised all of the money privately for that through memberships and through sponsorships, and they're continuing to do that. They will be taking some public money because they received a CMAQ, a congestion mitigation air quality grant, which will allow them to expand by another 300 bikes and 30 stations, bringing the total to 900 bikes and 90 stations across the city, which is essentially the scale at which we think it's going to be successful.
And right now there are, I think, 60 stations and 600 bikes.
That's
Is
right.
that?
60 stations, 600 beuts. That is the current laydown.
Yeah, and we had the Bike Share folks on the show 2 weeks ago, along with Nick Euler, who handles bike and pedestrian access on the city. One thing that one quick question. Other companies coming in, there are competitors to Bird. Lime is a competitor. Any plans to allow competitors in for e-scooters?
So right now we haven't had any formal inquiries for anybody, so we only had the formal inquiry from the Bird folks, and Explore Bike Share was the first entity that came to the city. We know that there are others who may have an interest. I think the councilman said it right. We want to make sure that we don't saturate the market with more than we need, and I think we're growing in a very deliberate fashion here, but we're not excluding anybody.
Right. It's just something you just said, and Nick Euler, who I guess works for you or in the city administration, bike and pedestrian access. And you just referenced this idea of every scooter trip is one less car trip.
Sure.
To some people, that they don't want to hear that. I mean, there are people probably listening to the show right now who say, "Well, wait, why are we so anti-car? Are we trying? Why would we be anti-car when you've got a big city, you've got jobs maybe out east or downtown, you've got people who live reverse from that? What you want is easier access, and no one's going to ride a scooter. I'm sure people are saying no one's going to ride. No, most people aren't going to ride a bike share all the way from, say, Germantown to downtown for a job. So, is there an antipathy towards cars? Again, we talked about this on the show 2 weeks ago. The bike lanes that encroach on lanes, and you go from 3 lanes to 2 or 2 lanes to 1. What's the philosophy there in terms of the city's approach to liking or disliking cars?
Yeah, I don't think it's a like or dislike. It's about accommodating everyone in the right-of-way, the public right-of-way. If you recall, the original rights-of-way that were established in civilizations years ago in cities were for people, and then people and animals, and people in carts, and then people in carriages, and people in, and then motorized vehicles came later. And somehow we've reached the point where now there's this feeling that the right-of-way is only for motorized vehicles, but the right-of-way is the public right-of-way, and so there is no anti-car, there is no pro-car. It's only allowing people who would like to use the public right-of-way as their mode of conveyance. I think that's important for everybody to have that access, and we're certainly sensitive to people who choose to commute. But there are other folks who may not have access to a car, who need that first mile, last mile. Our buses also use the public right-of-way, so it really is for everyone.
Before we go back to Bill, with 10 minutes left, your take on that. Is there an antipathy that you worry about, that you hear from your constituents? You're an elected official, that people say, hey, I don't like these bike lanes. They get in the way. They slow down my car commute. We're a car city. We just need to accept that. Do you hear that kind of thing from people?
We have not heard anything in the last 19 days around that. So I agree with what Chief McGowan said.
But even with the rise of bike lanes and bike share and this kind of...
I think, sometimes, surely, hey, why is there this bike lane here? Or you definitely hear that. But I think, I do agree. We're going to see more options. I mean, these 30-something thousand rides. There's no telling how many CO2 emissions were, not emitted by that. We spend $20-something million a year of our CIP budget on paving. That's 30,000 less car trips. So the roads lasting longer. So there are a lot of benefits. But again, it's about options. It's about optionality. And I think one of the things, we're talking our strategy, the city, we're focused on density. We're focused on getting people back living in the city. And, look at Crosstown or people downtown. There are all these areas where people want to, they want to work and recreate. And some people, they don't have cars. They don't need cars. And so some people are going to have a car, have a fleet of cars, and they're going to commute. So it's about providing optionality. Okay. And but I do want to recognize and really thank our previous city mayor, A.C. Wharton, because he invested in bike lanes. He saw the future, I think, and Memphis does have a lot of bike lane infrastructure that I think is going to position us well as we move into this next phase of what I call whether it's the shared economy or this kind of public transportation ecosystem where there are a lot of different options. It's not just a car or a bus.
Yeah, Bill.
Let's go a little bit broader for a second here on shared economy, because you were involved to a large degree in the regulations for Airbnb, which is not shared mobility, but it is part of the shared economy. Is that something we're going to be seeing more of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at all the innovation that's just happened over the last 3 to 5 years with whether it's ride sharing or sharing, a residence, Airbnb, things like that. And so, and again, this isn't kind of our first rodeo. We were the first city in the state of Tennessee to collect taxes automatically with Airbnb, and that's one of the big issues is kind of equality with the hotel industry. So we had an ordinance, everybody bought into it. We were the first city that did that, and Chief McGowan and the mayor's team did a great job executing that with them. We were one of the state came in. We were doing the ride sharing legislation, and we're very close to having the taxi industry, Uber and Lyft, all aligned on that. The state then stepped in, but our ordinance here was the framework for that. And if you look at what this means for Memphians in terms of, we've talked about transportation, but if you talk about wealth creation, Airbnb, that type, people renting out a room or their house, created $7 million of income for it was either Memphians or Shelby Countyans in 2017. $8,000 per host. That's real money. The scooter model is they pay people $5 to $20 per scooter to pick that scooter up, take it home, charge it, and put it back out. So this is creating opportunities for people on their own time to make a lot of
Uber
extra
and
money.
Lyft, other numbers on the people
I
who
don't
drive
have
Uber
those
and Lyft,
numbers.
but it's gotta
Yeah,
be
they
a
they
huge
are.
number,
I'm sure it
given
is.
the
And they put out
ubiquity
national,
of
but
it.
it's, you know, nationally hundreds of millions of dollars. So again, this is, you know, harnessing, you know, technology or, you know, demand using technology and providing optionality to people along a lot of different of the spectrum, but also to really for people to be entrepreneurs and make money on their own time. Look at what Amazon just announced last week, where they're going to be basically putting people in business doing delivery for same-day delivery. They've got it right now where just like you drive for Uber or Lyft, if you can go on Amazon and through an app go deliver packages on your own time. Now they're going to be actually putting people into business doing this. And so again, it's the opportunities are really endless when you look at how companies are innovating and using technology. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure Memphis is positioned, and we are a first adopter and have a reputation for that. So when the next wave of this comes out, people say, you know what, let's go to Memphis. They did ride sharing right. They did Airbnb right. They brought in the e-scooters and had dockless bikes. They did that right. And we want to go there and we want to innovate with them. That's what we are as a city. We're a river town. We brought the world rock and roll, FedEx. I mean, we're a town of entrepreneurs and innovators. And I think that's what the council and the mayor and Doug's team have brought to government. It's operating government like a business, being innovative, being responsive. And I think that's why Memphis is really starting to win right now. Every week there's good news coming out in this city. And at the end of the day, we're talking about shared mobility and scooters, but the real thing is it's about teamwork, collaboration, being creative, working hard, working together, so Memphis wins. And that's what I think people are starting to see.
How much of this, in terms of transportation, the kind of things we're talking about, Memphis 3.0, we've done a number of shows, almost certainly read about in the paper, is a kind of long-range, big-picture, comprehensive plan for the city, hugely focused on transit and transport. And how does the kind of things that the councilman's talking about, e-scooters, how does that fit into Memphis 3.0, and where are we in that process? When will plans begin to be revealed?
Sure. Well, Memphis 3.0 is our plan for the third century of our city. As you know, we haven't had a comprehensive plan for our city for about 36 years, and this plan will guide our city for the next, as we enter our next century. There is a complementary piece of that called Transit Vision 3.0 that talks about how we choose to move about our city and being ready to accommodate all modes of transportation. Fundamentally, what they're really doing is if you plan your land use and you're separately from your transportation, separately from your business and your housing models, you end up with things that don't work well together. So Memphis 3.0 talks about land use and anchors and transportation, how they all work seamlessly together. We're about 2/3 of the way through the Memphis 3.0. We've had nearly 20,000 people help inform that plan, and we're going through 14 planning districts. We're about halfway through the detailed plans for those districts where residents are identifying the anchors that are important to them, both the physical anchors and also the service level anchors that they want to see. And so it all fits together. Memphis 3.0 drives the kinds of land use and the kinds of things we aspire to. Transit Vision 3.0 talks about serving those areas that are the anchors and important places that people want to go. And then it all sets the stage for people to rally around that and say, if we're moving in this direction, then what services can I put into place? How should I change my business to feed that model?
A couple of minutes left. Bill.
So Doug, I've been in on a few discussions on things like tow truck regulations and cab regulations. The shared economy and the complexities of setting the rules for it and how it works procedurally, is that akin to that, or is that a completely different world?
Well, I think it does all fit together. It's not as closely tied as what you just said there, where that's something we're thinking about deliberately in Memphis 3.0. Mm-hmm. I will say it this way, we don't have it all figured out. And we shouldn't if we're entering into Memphis 3.0. If we had the answers, then why are we doing it? So we're entering this so that we can hear from our constituents and from the citizens what they want to see. And in the shared economy, we also don't have it all figured out. But I don't think we should wait until we have all the answers. We are already adapting. We put our very best plans forward. We're being as accommodating and entrepreneurial as we possibly can. We know there's going to be some issues that come out of that, but we quickly adapt, pivot, and then put some new procedures in place. We ought not wait till we have all the answers before we begin moving, and that's what we're doing. And I credit the mayor a lot for giving us permission to move, the city council for being great partners and giving us that top cover to move on some of these things. And so that's, I think, what the councilman was talking about, the spirit of collaboration and cooperation. Let's get all the information as much as we can, and let's move out, and then we'll adapt as we see change necessary.
Does that, some of the issues we're talking about, and talking about the city, and we've talked often here about Memphis being such a huge city and the history of growth, Memphis 3.0, identifying certain areas for growth. What is the council's take, and I know you're just one council member, but what is the council's take in terms of de-annexation? And some of the underpopulated areas, as many as 10 or more have been talked about de-annexing back to the county. Is that going to happen from your point of view?
Well, it's already happening. I think we have already de-annexed 2 areas,
Yes.
and have brought a real data-driven approach to it. I mean, the reality is, in some places, it costs us more money to have these areas in terms of the police services and fire services and things like this. So, what we'll see, I think this is going to be a spirited debate on the council.
So it's not one, I mean, it'll almost be one by one. The ones that have been identified, you'll go through each one the council will say,
I
this
think
one's
they're
gonna go,
definitely different areas. They're different areas that were recently annexed, or somewhat recently annexed, that are were very organized, and we have to be responsive to Nashville. But we're taking a data-driven approach to this in terms of how that would work. But we are doing it.
This is a whole show, and I didn't give you enough time to answer, but we'll do a whole other show about that. Thank you both for being here, and thank you for joining us. That's all the time we have. Join us again next week.